What is up, you guys? Dom here from Dojo Productions, and today I want to talk about using the Panasonic G7 for filming weddings. Let's do this thing. Now, I got to use the Panasonic G7 for a wedding because I thought, why not? Let's give it a shot. Let's see how it does. And to be honest, there are a lot of goods and a lot of bads, and today I am going to share those with you. Let's talk about all the good things first before we talk all about the bads. First, really nice thing is the ergonomics of the camera. It is pretty well built. It's light. The grip on the camera does feel pretty darn good. In my hands anyway. I don't necessarily have really big hands, but I don't necessarily have really small hands. So it was super nice just to carry around all day, doing handheld stuff. And well, when you're doing a wedding and you're carrying around a camera all day, you definitely want it to be comfortable in your hands because your hands can easily cramp after a couple of hours. But for the most part, the Panasonic G7 did feel pretty darn good in my hands, so that was a really, really nice thing. Second thing I want to talk about is the battery life. Battery life on the Panasonic G7 is surprisingly good, as I have talked before. When I'm shooting 4K, I can get about an hour and a half, and then when I'm shooting 1080p, I can get pretty close to 2 hours, and that is pretty amazing, really, for such a small camera and such a small little battery. Yeah, it packs a really, really powerful punch, and I think when you are shooting weddings, battery life is everything because you obviously, don't want to have to distract yourself with changing a battery because you can be missing some super important moments. So battery life is definitely, I think, a super important thing, and I think it's something you need to look into if you're going to do a bunch of wedding filmmaking. All right, another thing about the G7 that I absolutely love is just the buttons and the customizability. Now, I don't really necessarily have mine all like customized and decked out as some people would, because I kind of like where everything is on the camera, where the ISO, white balance, record button, just stuff like that. It is exactly where it should be. So I feel like I don't need to necessarily set it up differently. But some people might want to do that instead. I'm pretty sure you can probably switch from like 4K to like 1080p, 60 frames per second. I'm sure you can do that kind of stuff. Now, I don't necessarily do that, and that's okay. Everybody's different, but I kind of like where the buttons are and what they do. So I really didn't necessarily need mine all kind of customized up, so that's fine there. But I do have to say that I do super, super like having that record button as the shutter button. That is super, super nice because, well, the record button is usually kind of right here next to the shutter button, but having it as the shutter button is super nice because it's just a natural feel where your hand just kind of sits there instead of going like this. It's easier just to have it like this. So that is something that I definitely did kind of change up. So another thing that I super, super love about using this Panasonic G7 for weddings is the screen. The articulating screen is just super nice to have. I can get down low, I can get way up high like this if I need to, and it's also just super, super bright, which is nice because a lot of it, well, actually most of this wedding that I shot was done outside, and it was super bright, and it was just a really beautiful day. So having a super nice, sharp, bright LCD screen like the one that this G7 has was super, super nice. So when it got a little too bright, I would actually use the electronic viewfinder, and well, that was kind of a godsend, honestly, because there was at times where I just was getting too much reflection or glare or something like that, and I just went like this and I could see again. So that is super, super nice. So a camera with an electronic viewfinder, super, super nice. Definitely overlooked as well. All right, so now let's talk about lens selection that I used for this. First of all, I do want to say that I was not using any native Micro Four Thirds lenses or anything like that. I do not like the lenses. It's not that I don't like the lenses, it's just that I don't have any lenses. And plus, I would rather just use a speed booster and the lenses that I got because I already have enough lenses. So the speed booster that I'm using is the Viltrox speed booster. This thing is pretty darn nice. It is the 0.71 Viltrox speed booster that is compatible with the crop sensor lenses, and for the most part I was using the 17 to 50, this lens right here, and I thought it was a pretty darn good setup because it gives me the really nice wide shots if I need it, but it also would give me a super nice kind of a medium telephoto shot for portraits and stuff like that. So that I felt like was just the perfect lens. Also, it has image stabilization, which is super nice because most of the time I was going handheld anyway. So that is just a super nice thing. But if you are using Micro Four Thirds lenses, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Those will definitely work. I just like to adapt my Nikon lenses to my Panasonic G7. So that is just my personal opinion on what I feel like the best lens was. So now let's talk about a few of the cons, and I'm pretty sure you already saw this one coming, but low light on this thing isn't exactly like the best. I can definitely shoot up to about 1600 pretty clean, but after that it gets just a little too noisy for my taste. Now take that with a grain of salt because you might be able to shoot a little differently. You might be able to say, yeah, 2000, 2500 is fine for me, but for me, I just feel like 1600 was about it. Now I was using some pretty wide open lenses. I was using this 17 to 52.8 lens. I was also using the 35mm 1.8 lens, and I think I also brought the 50mm 1.4 lenses. So I really didn't have to worry about low light too much because I already had some pretty bright lenses. But in case you are shooting the native lenses, just know that low light isn't exactly the best on this, but it actually does pretty darn good for Micro Four Thirds camera. So another kind of downside for me, I feel like anyway, is the fact that it did not have image stabilization. Now I do understand that this camera is only $500, and they're probably not going to be able to put in stabilization in a camera like this, especially with a body this darn small. And another kind of downside thing I guess about this is the lack of high frame rates. It only goes up to 60 frames in 1080p. Not exactly what I would call the best slow motion. I would love it if it had at least 100 or 120 frames per second. That would have been nice, but 60 frames per second will definitely get the job done if you need that. All right, so all in all, G7 is pretty darn nice. It's got some really good qualities. It's got some, okay, not too great qualities. But overall, at the end of the day, what matters is the image quality, and I think the images that come out of this G7 are actually pretty darn remarkable. For only being $500, the 4K out of this is just spectacular. 1080p looks really darn sharp as well. Colors look really good, and overall, I just super like the way that the Panasonic G7 just looks. So I would definitely recommend the Panasonic G7 for anybody who is wanting to get into filmmaking and doing weddings, especially weddings because, well, it is a pretty inexpensive camera and it does do a pretty darn good job. So if you are just looking for ultimate image quality, I think this is definitely the way to go if you are on a budget. So there you go. That is my review of the Panasonic G7 for wedding filmmaking. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you loved it, subscribe. And until next time, I will see you guys next time. Bye.